In the spring of 1945, American soldiers pushing into Germany kept stumbling onto things that did not make sense. Rockets, the size of telephone poles hidden inside mountains. Jets with no propellers. A rifle that fired like nothing the Allies had ever built. Some of these weapons were only months from changing the war. Number 8 on this list could take off straight up like a firework. And number 3 came within a whisker of something far more terrifying than any bomb dropped in Europe. Hitler called them wonder weapons, and he was betting the whole war on them arriving in time. They didn't. GIS got there first. Before we count down, hit that subscribe button because some of these captured secrets ended up launching Americans into space. Let's begin the countdown with number 25. Number 25. The Panzerfaust looked like a length of pipe with a bulb stuck on the end, and it terrified American tank crews all the same. It was cheap, disposable, and deadly. A single German teenager crouched in a hedgerow could knock out a Sherman that cost a fortune to build. By 1945, factories were turning out over 1 million of these a month, and American soldiers advancing through French villages and German towns found crates of them stacked in barns, cellars, and railway sheds. GIS learned to grab them and turn them on their former owners, because unlike a bazooka, the Panzerfaust needed no training to fire. Point and release. Ordnance officers shipped examples home for study, and the throwaway anti-tank rocket became a template the whole world copied. It proved a frightening idea. One man on foot could destroy a machine worth 100 times his own weight. Number 24. The Nebelwerfer earned a nickname before Americans ever captured one. They called it the Screaming Mimi. This multi-barreled rocket launcher fired a salvo of shells that howled through the air with a shriek engineered specifically to break men's nerve before the warheads even landed. 6 barrels, loaded in seconds, could saturate a hillside in a single volley. American soldiers in Italy and Normandy dreaded the sound long before they understood the machine making it. When they finally overran the launch sites, they found a weapon that was crude, wheeled, and brutally efficient. Ordnance teams studied the spin-stabilized rockets closely because the Germans had solved a problem American designers were still wrestling with. The captured launchers revealed how the enemy delivered so much explosive so fast from so little. The scream, it turned out, was not a flaw. It was the point. Number 23. The Goliath was a weapon almost nobody expected. A miniature tank, no taller than a footstool, packed with explosives and steered by a soldier holding a control box on the end of a long cable. American troops in France began finding these squat little machines abandoned near beach defenses and bridges, tracks caked in mud, their spools of wire trailing behind them. The idea was simple and unsettling. Drive the Goliath under a tank or into a bunker, then detonate it from a safe distance. In practice, the cable snapped, engines stalled, and many were captured intact and useless before they ever reached a target. But the concept fascinated Allied engineers. Here was a remote-controlled demolition robot built in 1942. GIS hauled them back for inspection, and the little tracked bomb became one of the earliest ancestors of every remote-operated machine that followed it. Number 22. The STG-44 changed warfare forever, and most soldiers who first saw it had no idea what they were holding. American GIs picking through captured German positions kept finding a strange rifle that looked too long to be a submachine gun and too stubby to be a proper rifle. That was the whole trick. The Sturmgewehr, literally storm rifle, fired a shortened cartridge that let one soldier switch between aimed single shots and full automatic fire. It was the first true assault rifle, and nothing in the American arsenal matched it. Captured examples were crated up and studied intently by ordnance experts on both sides of the coming Cold War. The design logic behind it, a middle-power round in a controllable automatic weapon, would echo through every battlefield for the next 80 years. American soldiers had captured the blueprint for the future of the infantry rifle without fully realizing it. Number 21. The Fliegerfaust was so far ahead of its time, it barely worked, and that is exactly why it mattered. Germany was desperate to give ordinary foot soldiers a way to shoot down the Allied aircraft swarming over the Reich. Their answer was a shoulder-fired cluster of small barrels that launched a spray of tiny rockets into the sky. American troops overrunning weapons depots in the final months found a handful of these odd, multi-barreled tubes, along with drawings and unfinished prototypes. Most never saw combat. The rockets scattered too widely and lacked punch. But the idea was revolutionary. A single infantryman, standing in a field, aiming a launcher at a plane. Allied intelligence took the captured pieces seriously because the concept was sound, even if the execution was not. The shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile that soldiers carry today traces its family tree straight back to this failed German experiment. Number 20. This one belonged to the dark. The Zielgerät 1229, nicknamed Vampire, was an infrared night vision scope bolted to an assault rifle, paired with a bulky battery pack the shooter wore on his back. German night hunters used it to spot Allied soldiers in total darkness and fire on men who never saw them coming. When American units captured intact Vampire sets in 1945, they found something that felt almost like science fiction. A soldier could see in the dark. Intelligence officers understood immediately what they were looking at. The captured sites and their infrared projectors were among the most closely guarded prizes of the entire campaign, spirited home for testing far from public view. Night vision would become one of the defining advantages of every modern army, and the technology that made it possible was pulled from German hands in the last weeks of the war. Number 19, first pattern break. Here is where the weapons stop being clever and start being monstrous. The Sturmtiger was a Tiger tank with its turret ripped off and replaced by a colossal 380mm mortar, a naval weapon originally designed to hurl depth charges at submarines. Instead, it fired a rocket-assisted shell the size of a man that could flatten an entire building in one shot. Only a handful were ever built. American forces in Germany captured several of these lumbering monsters. Some abandoned when they ran out of ammunition, others simply stuck. GIS stood next to the barrel and could climb halfway inside it. The captured Sturmtigers revealed how far Germany would go to punch through fortified towns, mounting a ship's weapon on a tank chassis. It was slow, thirsty, and impractical, and it was also proof of how dangerous German engineering became when unrestrained by common sense. Number 18. If the Sturmtiger was big, the Karl Gerät was almost beyond belief. This was a self-propelled siege mortar that fired a shell over 2 tons in weight from a barrel 2 feet across. Only a few of these giants were ever completed, built specifically to smash the strongest fortifications on Earth. When American forces captured one of these behemoths, crews gathered around it in disbelief. The tracks alone dwarfed a standing man. Moving it required disassembly and special rail cars. The captured Karl Geriet showed Allied engineers the absolute ceiling of what tracked artillery could become. A weapon so specialized it could only be used against targets like fortress cities. It was a dead end, a marvel of over-engineering that consumed resources Germany could not spare. But standing beside the captured machine, American soldiers understood they had taken hold of one of the largest guns ever to move under its own power. Number 17. The V3 was a gun so ambitious it barely deserved the name. Officially the Hochdruckpumpe, or high-pressure pump, it was a monstrous multi-chambered cannon with a barrel over 100 yards long, designed to fire shells across the Channel and pound London without pause. Explosive charges spaced along the barrel would fire in sequence, accelerating each shell to enormous speed. The main battery, buried in a hillside in France, was destroyed by Allied bombing before it ever worked. But two shorter versions were built and actually fired on the city of Luxembourg. When the American Third Army swept through in early 1945, they captured the emplacements and the strange sequential guns inside them. Ordnance teams poured over the wreckage. The V3 never delivered the terror Hitler wanted, but the captured supergun revealed just how obsessed the regime had become with bombarding cities from impossible distances. Number 16. Now the war climbs into the sky. The Rheintochter, meaning Rhine Daughter, was a guided surface-to-air missile, one of the first serious attempts anywhere to shoot down aircraft with a rocket steered by a man on the ground. Germany was drowning under Allied bombing raids, and conventional flak could not stop the bombers. The answer was a missile a ground operator flew toward the target using radio commands. American and Allied teams overrunning research and production sites recovered test missiles, launch data, and engineering documents by the crate. The Rheintochter never became operational, but the ideas inside it were pure gold. Radio guidance, ground control, a rocket chasing a plane through the air. Every captured component fed directly into the missile programs that would define the decades after the war. American investigators knew they were not just seizing weapons, they were seizing the future of air defense. Number 15. The Enzian took a different and stranger path. This surface-to-air missile was built largely from wood because Germany was running short of aluminum and shaped almost like a tiny fighter plane. It was meant to fly into a formation of bombers and detonate an enormous warhead, downing several aircraft at once. The program never reached combat, but American forces captured examples and reams of technical material as they overran test facilities. The wooden missile fascinated investigators precisely because of its desperation. A guided anti-aircraft weapon carved from timber told the story of a nation improvising under collapse. Yet the aerodynamics and control concepts were sophisticated, and the captured Enzian added another piece to the vast puzzle of German missile research that Allied teams were racing to gather before the trail went cold. Crude materials, advanced ideas. That contradiction ran through nearly everything the Reich built in its final year. Number 14. The Wasserfall was the most dangerous of the anti-aircraft missiles because it actually might have worked. It looked like a smaller cousin of the great V-2 rocket, and that was no accident. It used the same basic principles, scaled down and adapted to chase bombers into the sky at supersonic speed. Had it entered service in numbers, It could have made daylight raids over Germany suicidal. American teams sweeping through the missile research complex captured intact examples, launch equipment, and mountains of paperwork. Investigators understood at once that Wasserfall was a genuine leap, a guided, radio-controlled missile fast enough to catch a bomber. The captured hardware and the engineers who built it flowed straight into post-war programs on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Of all the German anti-aircraft rockets, this was the one that kept Allied experts awake at night, wondering how close the enemy had come. Number 13. The Ruhrstahl X-4 pointed the way to a weapon that still rules the skies today. It was an air-to-air missile, fired from a fighter and guided by thin wires that unspooled behind it as it flew, letting the pilot steer it straight into an enemy bomber. The idea was to let a single German fighter destroy heavy Allied aircraft from beyond the range of their defensive guns. Production was disrupted before it could reach the front in force, and American forces captured examples and blueprints as they seized the factories. The wire-guided concept, a pilot flying a missile into his target, was decades ahead of its moment. Captured X-4 material was studied with enormous care. Guided missiles fired from aircraft would eventually become the deciding weapon of aerial combat. And here, in a captured German warehouse, sat one of the earliest working attempts to make that idea real. Number 12. Second pattern break. The Henschel H-293 had already drawn blood, which made capturing it all the more urgent. This was a rocket-boosted guided glide bomb, dropped from a bomber and then steered by radio toward Allied ships. A flare in its tail let the operator track it as it streaked toward the target. German aircraft had used it to sink and damage Allied vessels in the Mediterranean and Atlantic, and for a time it made every ship at sea feel exposed. When American forces captured production examples and control gear on land, naval intelligence dissected them immediately. The HS-293 proved that a bomb no longer had to be dumb. It could be guided, corrected, and flown into a moving target from miles away. That single idea rewrote the future of naval warfare, and the captured German glide bombs were the first working proof that the age of the guided weapon had already arrived. Number 11. The Fritz X was the HS-293's deadlier sibling, and its record was chilling. This was an armor-piercing guided bomb, heavy enough to punch through the thick deck armor of a battleship, and steered by radio all the way down. In 1943, it had struck the Italian battleship Roma, detonating her magazines and sending her to the bottom with most of her crew. Allied warships had no answer. When American and Allied forces captured intact Fritz X bombs and their guidance equipment, the recovery was treated as a top priority. Here was a weapon that could sink the mightiest ships afloat from high altitude, guided by a single operator. The captured bombs and their control systems were studied down to the last wire, and the lessons shaped both future weapons and the defenses built to stop them. The Fritz X had already proven that a guided bomb could kill a battleship. Capturing it meant learning exactly how. Number 10. Now the propellers vanish. The Heinkel He-162, called the Volksjäger or People's Fighter, was a jet built in a panic. Germany, running out of pilots, fuel, and time, wanted a cheap jet that teenagers with minimal training could fly against the bombers. Built partly of wood and glued together, it was rushed from drawing board to flight in a matter of weeks. When American forces captured airfields in 1945, they found these sleek little jets sitting on the tarmac, some barely finished. Test pilots flew captured examples and reported an aircraft that was fast and nimble but treacherous to handle. The Ha-162 was a symbol of desperation, a jet fighter conceived as a last-ditch gamble. But it was still a jet, and American engineers examined every captured airframe closely because even in defeat, Germany was handing the Allies a crash course in the aircraft of the coming age. Number 9. The Arado R-234 was a genuinely brilliant machine, the world's first operational jet bomber and reconnaissance aircraft. It could fly so high and so fast that Allied fighters simply could not catch it, streaking over enemy lines to photograph troop movements or drop bombs before anyone could react. For the pilots who flew it, it was a glimpse of a future where propellers were obsolete. American forces captured several intact R-234s at German airfields as the Reich collapsed, and the prizes were shipped across the Atlantic for exhaustive testing. Engineers marveled at the clean design, the jet engines, the sheer performance. The captured Arados taught American aircraft designers lessons that fed directly into the jet bombers of the following decade. In the race to understand jet flight, seizing a working example of the first jet bomber ever built was worth more than almost anything else on a captured airfield. Number 8. The Ba 349 Natter, meaning Viper, was one of the most alarming ideas of the war. It was a rocket-powered interceptor that launched straight up like a firework, standing on end, blasting toward Allied bomber formations with barely any runway needed. The pilot would fire a nose full of rockets into the bombers, then bail out as the aircraft fell apart, both man and engine floating down separately by parachute. Its only manned test flight ended in tragedy, but the concept horrified and fascinated Allied planners in equal measure. When American forces captured surviving Natter airframes and their launch equipment, they hauled them home for study. A vertical launch, throwaway rocket plane flown by a single pilot was unlike anything the Allies had imagined. The captured Vipers were proof of just how radical and how reckless German engineering had become as the walls closed in. Number 7. The Horton Ho 229 looked like it had flown in from another century. It was a jet-powered flying wing, a smooth, tailless aircraft with no fuselage sticking up, decades ahead of anything in Allied service. Its shape was so clean, it may have been harder to spot on radar, a quality that would obsess aircraft designers for generations. Only a few were ever built, and when American forces reached a workshop in central Germany in 1945, they captured a nearly complete prototype. The strange, bat-like machine was crated up and shipped to the United States, where it stunned the engineers who examined it. A jet-flying wing in 1945 from a nation already in ruins. The captured Horten survived to become one of the most studied trophies of the entire war, a physical link between wartime German ambition and the radical aircraft shapes that would appear many decades later. Number 6. The Me-163 Comet was the fastest thing in the sky and one of the deadliest to its own pilots. This tiny rocket-powered interceptor could scream toward bomber formations at speeds no propeller plane could dream of, using volatile chemical fuels that were as likely to kill the man flying it as any enemy gunner. Its fuel was so corrosive it could dissolve human flesh, and crashes were often fatal in horrifying ways. Yet its performance was staggering. When American forces captured intact comets on German airfields, they treated them with extreme caution and enormous interest. The little rocket plane represented the raw edge of speed, a glimpse of flight beyond the reach of conventional engines. American engineers learned from every captured example, even as they recognized the weapon's terrible danger. The Comet was a machine that flirted with the impossible, and it nearly killed everyone who tried to master it. Number 5. Beneath the waves, the Type 21 told a different kind of story. This was a submarine so advanced it made every other U-boat and every Allied submarine look obsolete overnight. Nicknamed the Electro-Boot, it could run faster and quieter underwater than on the surface, stay submerged far longer, and slip past defenses that had beaten earlier boats. Had it arrived a year sooner, in numbers it might have reopened the Battle of the Atlantic. But the war ended before more than a couple ever made a war patrol. When Germany surrendered, several Type 21 boats fell into Allied hands, and the United States Navy took possession of examples for intensive study. Naval engineers were astonished by the streamlined hull and the underwater performance. The captured Electro-Boots reshaped submarine design across the world, a revolution that arrived just too late to save the nation that built it. Number 4. Third pattern break. This one was not a weapon at all. It was the search for the most terrible weapon of all. As American forces drove into Germany, a secret Allied mission raced ahead of the front lines with a single mission: find out how close Germany had come to building an atomic bomb and seize everything before it fell into the wrong hands. The teams captured tons of uranium ore, containers of heavy water, laboratory equipment, and a hidden experimental reactor tucked into a cave beneath a castle town. They rounded up the scientists, too. What they discovered was both a relief and a warning. Germany's nuclear program was far behind, tangled in errors and starved of resources. But the captured materials and the questions they raised shaped the atomic age that was about to dawn. American soldiers had not captured a Nazi atomic bomb. They had made certain, once and for all, that there would never be one. Number 3. The STG-44 rifle we mentioned earlier was a hint of Germany's genius for infantry weapons. The Me-262 was its equal in the sky, and it sits this high for good reason. It was the world's first operational jet fighter, and the first time American bomber crews saw one, they could scarcely believe how fast it closed the distance. Propeller fighters were simply outclassed. Had it arrived earlier, in greater numbers, and been used properly, it might have wrested control of the skies away from the Allies. American forces captured dozens of these swept-wing jets as German airfields fell, and a special team was formed for the sole purpose of gathering, flying, and shipping them home. Test pilots who flew the captured Schwalbes came back shaken by the performance. The Me-262 was the plane that ended the propeller era, and America carried it home to learn everything it could. Number 2. Everyone knew the V-2 was coming, but nothing prepared American soldiers for actually finding it. The V-2 was the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a rocket that climbed to the edge of space before falling on London and other cities faster than the speed of sound, with no warning and no defense. When American forces broke into an underground factory carved deep inside a mountain, they found production lines of these enormous rockets stretching into the darkness. It was one of the great captures of the war, and also a place of horror, because the missiles had been built by prisoners worked to death in the tunnels, a fact that must never be forgotten alongside the machinery. American teams raced to remove as many rockets, parts, and documents as possible. Hundreds of railcars of components were shipped out, along with the men who designed them. The V-2 was a weapon of terror. It was also, unmistakably, a rocket that could reach space. Number 1. And that is why the number 1 capture is not really a single weapon at all. It is what the V-2 became in American hands. When the United States seized those rockets, those blueprints, and those German engineers under a secret program, they did not just remove a threat. They inherited a head start. The captured V-2s were reassembled and launched in the deserts of the American Southwest, teaching a generation of engineers how to build and fly a large rocket. The men who had aimed missiles at London found themselves aiming rockets at the sky and then at the moon. The weapon Hitler built to terrorize cities became the foundation of the American space program. Every astronaut who ever rode a rocket into orbit owed something to those captured machines pulled from a mountain in the ruins of the Reich. The Nazis built it to end lives. America captured it and used it to reach the stars. So there they are, 25 secret weapons that American soldiers seized before they could change history. Some were desperate junk, some were decades ahead of their time, and a few, like the ones at the very top, ended up rewriting the future entirely. Which one shocked you the most? The rocket plane that launched straight up, the flying wing, or the missile that carried men into space? Tell me in the comments which capture you would have most wanted to see. And if you made it this far, you already know which button to hit. Thanks for watching.